I stood frozen in the kitchen doorway, watching my daughter scrub cake frosting off the floor with her tiny hands, while her stepsister twirled in a glittery princess gown, opening piles of gifts. She's not the birthday girl, so she has to help, they said. That's when something inside me broke. Because if they wouldn't treat her like a princess, I would. If you've ever watched someone mistreat your child and felt that quiet rage boiling inside, you're not alone. Stick around to hear how I turned heartbreak into the most unforgettable revenge. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more real stories. My name is Amanda. I'm 40 years old, a middle school art teacher, and the proud mother of an 8-year-old girl named Lucy. She's my sunshine quiet, but clever. The kind of child who draws unicorns on napkins and always remembers to say thank you. Life hasn't been easy for us, but we've always had each other. After my divorce, it was just Lucy and me for almost 3 years. I focused on rebuilding our lives, our confidence, our little routines. And then I met Brian. He was charming, successful, and surprisingly patient with a single mom like me. He had a daughter too, Emma, a bright, confident 9-year-old from his previous marriage. At first, I thought we had the perfect blended family story. Emma and Lucy seemed to get along, and Brian treated Lucy kindly. Or so I thought. After a year of dating, Brian and I got married. We moved into his house, which meant Lucy and I were stepping into his world. Emma already had her room decorated like a fairy tale, soft pink walls, canopy, bed shelves full of dolls. Lucy, on the other hand, got the guest room. We painted it together, tried to make it feel like home, but it never quite did. Not when Emma's grandparents, the ones who visited every weekend, barely acknowledged Lucy's presence. Brian's parents, Harold and Susan, were old-fashioned. They doted on Emma, brought her gifts constantly, praised her for everything from good grades to simply breathing. But when it came to Lucy, they were polite, coldly polite. No hugs, no real conversations, just stiff smiles and phrases like your daughter instead of using her name. Still, I tried to see the best in them. Maybe they just needed time. Maybe they didn't know how to bond with a child who wasn't blood-related. I made excuses, softened their indifference in my mind, because Lucy never complained. She'd just squeeze my hand tighter when we visited them or sit quietly while Emma opened yet another toy they brought over. Brian didn't seem to notice the imbalance. They mean well, he'd say. They're just more familiar with Emma. But to me, it felt like Lucy was invisible. Even at home, things started to shift. Emma was confident, vocal, always the center of attention. Lucy, being quieter, often got overshadowed. At dinner, Emma would dominate the conversation, while Lucy waited her turn only to be interrupted or ignored. I tried to gently redirect things, but I could see it, my daughter, shrinking a little more each day. Then came the birthday planning. Emma's 9th birthday was coming up, and Susan and Harold were beyond excited. They offered to host it at their house, promising something magical. I assumed it'd be a simple party, maybe some decorations and cake. I was wrong. They went all out. Custom princess decorations, a rented pony pink tents in the backyard for a royal tea, a literal throne chair, and a giant cake shaped like a castle. Emma got a brand new designer gown to wear, complete with rhinestone tiara and glittery shoes. Lucy, she got a chore list. "Can you help keep things tidy during the party?" Susan had said, smiling a little too sweetly. Since it's not her day, it'd be nice for her to contribute. I stared at her dumbfounded. She's 8. She's a child. She should be enjoying the party too. But Susan just shrugged. Emma only turns 9 once. I wanted to pull Lucy from the entire event, but she was already standing behind me, nodding shyly. "It's okay, Mommy," she whispered. "I don't mind helping." That night, I tucked her into bed and kissed her forehead, holding back tears. "You're so good, Lucy," I whispered. "You don't have to be." She smiled the saddest smile I'd ever seen and turned to the wall. I should have known then, should have trusted my gut, but I didn't realize just how deep the divide would go. Not until the party itself. The day of the party arrived, and from the moment we pulled into Susan and Harold's driveway, it felt like we were stepping onto the set of a children's movie. There were pink and purple streamers lining the entire fence, a bubble machine spitting glittery foam into the air, and soft Disney instrumentals playing from hidden speakers. A woman dressed like a fairy godmother greeted guests at the gate, handing out mini tiaras and magic wands to each child. Emma stood in the center of it all, radiant in her shimmering gown. She twirled on the lawn, like royalty surrounded by laughing friends and flashing cameras. Lucy, in her simple blue sundress, stood quietly beside me, her hands clasped together. She wasn't on the guest list. No one had told me that, at least not directly. But the looks were clear. The way Susan gave Lucy a clipboard with instructions, the way Harold avoided eye contact. "She can help collect wrapping paper and keep the drink station clean," Susan said lightly, like she was assigning a helpful task to a staff member. "It's a big party. We'll need an extra hand." I was stunned. She's just a kid. She should be playing. Susan smiled, but there was ice behind her eyes. "Amanda, it's Emma's day. Lucy's presence is appreciated, but let's not make this about fairness." My throat tightened. I turned to Lucy, ready to tell her we were leaving. But she gave me a small, brave smile and whispered, "I can help, Mom. It's okay." It wasn't okay. But I didn't want to ruin the day for her, either, not yet. So I let it happen. I watched my daughter pick up discarded plates while the other girls ran laughing toward the bouncy castle. I watched her refill the lemonade pitchers while Emma posed for selfies with her pony. I watched her, and I hated myself. For every second, I let it continue. At one point, Brian came over, looking uncomfortable. "Maybe it's not that big a deal," he said, clearly sensing my fury. "Lucy seems fine." "She's not fine," I snapped. "She's trying to earn love she already deserves." He frowned, rubbed the back of his neck, and walked away. I couldn't believe it. I had married this man. I had trusted this family. And now I was watching my daughter be treated like an afterthought. An hour later, I walked into the kitchen to check on her. That's when it happened, the moment that shattered something inside me. There was Lucy, standing barefoot on a stool by the sink, washing dishes piled high from the birthday lunch. Her tiny arms struggled with the size of the plates, and the soapy water had soaked through the sleeves of her dress. She looked up at me, startled, but then smiled like nothing was wrong. "They said I'm not the birthday girl, so I should help out," she said softly. I froze. Behind me, I could still hear the music, the clatter of party games, Emma squealing with delight as she opened gift after gift. And there was Lucy, 8 years old, doing the dishes. My heart cracked in two. I walked over, dried my hands on a dish towel, and pulled Lucy down from the stool. "That's enough," I said. "We're done here. Her eyes widened. But the dishes? We're not doing the dishes today, I said, my voice trembling. We're going to get ice cream. You and me. She blinked. Just us. Just us. I didn't even say goodbye to Brian. I didn't explain anything to Susan or Harold. I just took Lucy's hand, walked out the front door, and never looked back. In the car, as she licked her mint chocolate chip cone and leaned her head on my shoulder, I felt the fire begin to grow inside me, not just anger, but purpose. If they didn't see her worth, then I would show them. That night, after the party, I tucked Lucy into bed and watched her fall asleep with her little stuffed turtle clutched to her chest. Her long lashes fluttered. Her cheeks were still sticky from ice cream. She didn't say a word about the party. She didn't need to. The silence said it all. I stood there in the doorway of her room, arms folded tightly over my chest, feeling the storm swell in my gut. For years, I had bent over backwards, trying to make this blended family work. I had cooked meals for people who couldn't remember my daughter's birthday. I had smiled through comments like, "Well, she's not really our grandchild." I had swallowed my pride, hoping that time would soften their hearts, but they weren't just indifferent anymore. They were cruel. And the worst part, I had let it happen right in front of Lucy's eyes. I barely slept. When Brian got home, he didn't even ask where I'd gone. He just sighed and said, "You embarrassed my parents." "You couldn't have waited till the party ended," I stared at him. "Your daughter got a pony and a castle cake. Mine got dish duty. That's not just favoritism. It's emotional abuse," he scoffed. "You're being dramatic." "Dramatic," I repeated, my voice low and dangerous. "Your parents gave Emma the royal treatment and turned Lucy into the help." He looked away. "They didn't mean it that way." "You didn't see her face." "Brian," I snapped, "you didn't see her trying not to cry while she scrubbed icing off plastic plates." Brian didn't reply. He just muttered something about being tired and walked off to bed. That was the night I knew something had changed between us, something permanent. And it wasn't just between me and him. The next morning, Susan called. She didn't ask about Lucy. She didn't apologize. Instead, she said Emma was a little upset that Lucy left the party early. "We think it would be nice if she made an apology card." I almost laughed. Apologize? For what? For being treated like a maid. Susan sighed dramatically. "Amanda, I know you're sensitive about this, but we all have to do our part to make this family blend." "No," I said flatly. "Lucy's not going to apologize for your behavior, and if you ever speak to her like that again, you won't see either of us." Then I hung up. From that moment on, I stopped trying to win them over. Instead, I focused on Lucy. Her birthday was just 3 weeks away. I asked her what she wanted, and she shrugged, like she didn't expect much. "Maybe we could go to the zoo," she said. "Just us." I smiled, but my heart ached. No child should have to set their expectations that low. That week, I requested a few days off work and started planning something big. Not just a birthday celebration, but something that would remind Lucy of her worth. Something unforgettable. I started calling vendors. I dipped into my savings. I even asked my students' parents for help decorating the community center. When I told them what had happened at Emma's party, one mom burst into tears. "We'll be there," she said. "Lucy deserves better than that." Meanwhile, Brian stayed quiet. We spoke less, slept apart. He spent more time at work, or so he said. I didn't ask. I was too busy building something brighter for my daughter. 3 days before Lucy's birthday, I found a small folded note on the kitchen counter. It was from Brian. I'm taking Emma to Susan and Harold's for the weekend. I don't think I should be around for Lucy's party. I don't want to cause more tension. He didn't sign it with love. He didn't even ask what time the party was. And strangely, that note gave me peace. Because it was confirmation of something I had feared, but hadn't yet accepted. Brian was never really Lucy's family. And maybe he was never truly mine either. The day of Lucy's party arrived, and the community center I'd rented was nearly unrecognizable. My art students had transformed it into a fairy tale wonderland. There were painted cardboard castles, handmade paper lanterns floating from the ceiling, and a path of glittering stars that led to a throne draped in gold velvet. The air smelled of cotton candy and popcorn, and upbeat music echoed through the room. And right in the center of it all stood Lucy, dressed in a custom-made gown the color of morning sunlight. I had found it at a second-hand boutique and tailored it myself over 2 sleepless nights. Her hair was curled and pinned with tiny daisies, and as she stepped into the room, every head turned. Someone gasped. Another whispered, "She looks like a real princess." Lucy stood frozen wide-eyed, taking it all in. Then she turned to me, almost afraid to believe it was real. For me, she whispered. I nodded, tears threatening to spill. Every single bit of it. She didn't say anything, just ran into my arms and hugged me so tight I could barely breathe. That hug. That was everything. The party was perfect. Her friends from school came, and even kids from my class showed up with handmade cards and gifts. One of my students, a high school senior with a talent for music, played her favorite songs on guitar. Another dressed up as a silly magician and performed tricks that made Lucy laugh so hard she nearly fell over. Instead of a pony, Lucy rode in on a little decorated wagon pulled by 2 giggling girls from the neighborhood. Instead of a cake from a luxury bakery, we had a homemade 3-tier vanilla cake covered in candy daisies made by me and 2 other moms in my building. It wasn't expensive, but it was full of love. The kind of love Lucy had been starved for in that house. At one point, one of the younger girls asked Lucy where her real dad was. Lucy paused for a moment, then answered simply, "He's not here today, but I've got my mom, and she's enough." I nearly broke down. It was the happiest I'd ever seen her, and yet somewhere in the back of my mind, a small part of me still burned. Because Susan, Harold, Brian, they hadn't even called. No message, no card, nothing. I shouldn't have been surprised, but part of me had hoped that maybe, just maybe, this time would be different. That hope was shattered 2 days later. Brian came home late one evening and found me folding laundry. He looked around and said flatly, "So I heard Lucy's party was a hit." "You heard?" I asked, not looking up. "From who, my mom?" I raised an eyebrow. Interesting. She wasn't invited. He sat down on the arm of the couch, arms crossed. "She said you were being petty, that you deliberately excluded the whole family." I dropped the laundry. Petty. After they made my daughter do chores at a child's birthday party. After she was treated like the help while Emma got paraded around like Cinderella. He opened his mouth, but didn't respond. Lucy deserved one day, I continued. One day where she felt seen, celebrated, like she belonged in the world. Brian sighed and for a second I thought maybe, just maybe, he'd apologize. But instead he said, "Their family, Amanda. You don't just cut people out like that." That was it. I stood up slowly. "You're right. You don't just cut people out. You let them show you who they are again and again. And eventually, you stop letting them hurt your child." He didn't follow me when I left the room. He didn't call after me. And he didn't sleep in our bed that night. A week later, he packed a bag and moved into his parents' guest house to think things over. Lucy never asked where he went. Not once. The house was quieter after Brian left. There were no more tense dinners, no more forced smiles during awkward family gatherings, and no more whispers behind Lucy's back. For the first time in years, it was just the two of us. And somehow, that silence felt like peace. But peace wasn't enough. I wanted justice for Lucy, and maybe even for the version of me that had once begged for acceptance. So, I stopped waiting for apologies. I started documenting every slight, every text message Susan had sent that undermined Lucy, every email where Brian ignored my concerns. I dug up old pictures, Christmas mornings, where Lucy sat without a gift, while Emma tore into a mountain of boxes, family trips where Lucy wasn't even invited. I had all the evidence I needed to prove what I had been too scared to say out loud for years. They were emotionally neglecting my daughter and Brian. He was complicit. Then I made the first move. I filed for full custody. It wasn't just symbolic. Even though Brian was Lucy's stepfather, we had blended our lives and shared responsibilities for years. But now, I needed something on paper. I needed to formally separate my child from a household that saw her as less than. My lawyer, a fierce woman named Carla, took one look at the documents and said, "You've got a case, and honestly, I think you've got a moral obligation to do this." So we filed. Quietly, strategically. When Brian was served, he didn't even try to fight it. His response came through a lawyer, cold and clinical. "Brian does not object to relinquishing all custodial involvement with Lucy." He was done. Good riddance. But I wasn't. Next, I started talking. Not gossiping. Telling the truth. At school functions, when people asked why Brian and I had separated, I didn't sugarcoat it anymore. I said, "He stood by while his daughter was celebrated, and mine was treated like a servant." That was the last straw. Some looked shocked. Others quietly nodded, as if they'd always sensed it. The real shift happened on social media. I made a post on a local parenting group, not naming names, but sharing the story of two little girls, one celebrated, the other dismissed. I ended it with a question. What message are we sending our children when we show love with conditions? It went viral in our community. Dozens of parents messaged me privately. Some had seen the dynamics firsthand and had been afraid to speak up. Others offered support. One mom even said, "Your story made me realize I've been doing the same thing to my stepdaughter. I'm changing that today." But the karma didn't stop there. About 2 weeks later, Emma's school held their spring talent show. Emma had a solo dance number. Brian and his parents showed up dressed to the nines, front row, center cameras ready. They waved at her wildly when she took the stage. But when the curtain rose, Emma didn't move. She stood frozen. Then she looked straight at the audience and said loud and clear, "Why didn't you ever clap for Lucy?" The room went silent. Susan's face turned bright red. Brian stood up, looking panicked. But Emma just stood there, her little hands clenched trembling. A teacher gently walked her off stage, and the show went on. But the damage was done. Emma had noticed, and she had spoken. That night, I got a call. It was Susan. For the first time in our entire relationship, she sounded humble, small. "Amanda," she began, "I don't know what to say." "Then don't," I replied. "Just listen." And I told her everything, every hurt, every comment, every moment Lucy had come to me, asking why she wasn't good enough. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just let the truth sit there thick and heavy between us. By the end, Susan was silent. Then she whispered, "We failed her." I failed her. I didn't comfort her. It wasn't my job to make her feel better for the pain she had caused. But I said, "You have one chance to do better. Not with me, with Lucy. If you can't love her like your own, then stay away, forever." A week later, a letter arrived, handwritten, from Emma. "Dear Lucy, I'm really sorry for what happened at my birthday. I thought it was normal because that's how they always acted. But it's not okay. You're way cooler than a princess with a pony. I hope I can come to your next party. Love, Emma." Lucy read it quietly, then looked up at me. "Do you think she means it?" I hugged her tightly. "I think she's learning, just like we did." That summer, we took a road trip, just us girls. We visited art museums, swam in lakes, ate too much roadside ice cream, and laughed until our cheeks hurt. For the first time, we weren't trying to fit into someone else's version of family. We were writing our own. One warm September afternoon, Lucy and I were sitting on our small apartment balcony, sipping lemonade and painting each other's nails with sparkly polish we'd found at the dollar store. She giggled when I accidentally smudged her pinky. I started to apologize, but she waved me off. "It's okay, Mom," she said. "It's just nails. We'll fix it." That sentence hit me harder than I expected, because for so long I had been trying to fix everything. Her heart, her trust, the quiet sadness in her eyes. And here she was, teaching me that sometimes love was in the trying, not the perfection. I reached for her hand and held it gently in mine. "You know," I said softly, "you've always been my princess." She smiled. "I know." I paused, then asked, "But do you believe it now?" She thought for a moment, then nodded. "I do." Because when Emma had a princess party, it felt like pretending. But at my party, I didn't have to pretend. I swallowed the lump in my throat. "You made me feel like I belonged, Mom," she added, looking up at me. "Like I was picked, not just there." Tears welled in my eyes, and I pulled her into my arms. "I will always pick you, Lucy, every single day." That night, as I tucked her into bed, she whispered something just before drifting off to sleep. "I'm not invisible anymore." I sat beside her, brushing her hair back from her forehead, and whispered back, "No, baby, you shine now, and nothing, no party, no people can ever dim that light again." And with that, the story of two girls, one forgotten, one found, finally found its ending. But for Lucy and me, it was just the beginning.